For decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran cultivated a doctrine of absolute defense centered on what was once believed to be an impregnable asset, a sprawling subterranean empire of missile cities carved deep beneath the jagged peaks of the nation's mountain ranges. These facilities, built with billions of dollars and generations of engineering expertise, were designed to withstand the most modern conventional strikes, serving as the ultimate insurance policy for the regime's survival. However, in the span of a single transformative night, that fundamental belief in underground invincibility has been shattered. As of late March 2026, the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East has undergone a tectonic shift as the United States military launched a coordinated offensive aimed directly at the heart of Iran's missile infrastructure. This operation, now widely identified by military analysts as the onset of the second phase of a broader conflict between Washington and Tehran, has proven to be significantly more intense and strategically devastating than the initial opening salvos. While the first phase of the war focused on the systematic paralysis of Iran's integrated air defense networks, the destruction of electronic warfare centers, and the neutralization of primary naval assets in the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, this new phase has penetrated much deeper, both literally and figuratively. On the night of March 27, 2026, the strategic calculation of the Iranian leadership was fundamentally reset. As darkness fell over the Midwestern United States, 4 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, embarking on a high-stakes, long-range mission that would take them across oceans and through contested airspace. Each of these B-2 bombers was laden with the most formidable conventional weapon in the American arsenal, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a bunker buster designed specifically for the world's most hardened targets. The primary objectives for this elite strike force were a series of critical underground installations located in the strategic hubs of Tehran, Isfahan, and Yazd, as well as a massive missile storage complex situated along the Iranian coastline. The results of these strikes, documented through high-resolution satellite imagery and corroborated by intelligence reports, indicate a catastrophic structural collapse of several key facilities. The fourth target of the night, perhaps the most urgent from a global economic perspective, was not located deep within a mountain range, but was instead situated near the critical bottleneck of the Strait of Hormuz. This facility served as a high-density storage depot for Iran's significant stockpile of anti-ship ballistic missiles, the very weapons that have long allowed Tehran to hold nearly 20% of the world's oil trade hostage. By targeting this coastal reservoir, the United States sought to eliminate the physical power behind Iran's most potent strategic leverage. According to reports from U.S. Central Command, the impact of the GBU-57 munitions triggered a massive chain reaction of secondary explosions within the facility. The high-density storage of volatile missile components led to a self-perpetuating cycle of fires and detonations that likely incinerated a vast majority of the regional arsenal, effectively disarming Iran's ability to use the strait as a geopolitical weapon for the foreseeable future. However, the air campaign was only one facet of this multi-domain operation. While the B-2 bombers were striking deep inland, the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman became a graveyard for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. In a series of simultaneous engagements, Iranian fast attack boats, patrol vessels, and coastal defense assets were systematically targeted by precision-guided munitions launched from a variety of platforms. Central Command data confirms that more than 150 Iranian vessels were either damaged or completely destroyed during the night's conflict, a figure that represents the near total neutralization of Iran's littoral combat capabilities. Adding to the regional pressure, the arrival of the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, carrying 3,500 Marines, has signaled that the United States is prepared for sustained coastal operations and the enforcement of a new maritime reality. Iranian defense planners are now struggling to manage a cascading series of crises across multiple fronts. The coalition strategy has evolved from mere destruction to the systematic paralysis of Iran's ability to recover. A prime example of this can be found at the Dezful missile base in Khuzestan province. This massive subterranean complex had already suffered significant damage in previous strikes, but as Iranian recovery teams attempted to clear debris and reopen access roads, they found themselves targeted once again. This time, the targets were not the silos themselves, but the heavy machinery, excavators, and bulldozers essential for repair. The message from Central Command was unequivocal. There would be no repairs allowed. By striking the logistics chain and the personnel responsible for reconstruction, the coalition has dismantled the core tenet of the Iranian underground doctrine, which assumed that any damage could eventually be mitigated through engineering. With the repair equipment destroyed and the roads blocked, the logistical isolation of these bases has become absolute. The precision and depth of the strikes on the night of March 27th reached into the very roots of the missile program. In the outskirts of Tehran, a deep tunnel system that served as the final assembly line for Shahab and Sejil ballistic missile bodies was targeted. This facility was the final stop in a long production chain, a location identified through months of meticulous signal intelligence and satellite surveillance by American and Israeli agencies. The B-2 bombers released the GBU-57 from high altitude, allowing the weapon to penetrate layers of reinforced concrete and granite before detonating at an estimated depth of 50 meters. The resulting seismic wave reportedly crippled the assembly lines and collapsed the support infrastructure. Ventilation shafts were sealed by the blast, and the electrical systems were completely severed, forcing the evacuation of all personnel. A multi-billion-dollar facility, the crown jewel of Iranian military production, was effectively neutralized by a single, precisely placed weapon. The damage was not limited to assembly. It extended to the propulsion systems that give these missiles their reach. In Isfahan province, the strike focused on a rocket engine test complex, the heart of the ballistic missile program, where engines were developed, tested, and calibrated. Reports suggest that the explosion of a GBU-57 at a depth of 150 feet destroyed the sensitive calibration equipment and the specialized test chambers. While Tehran has attempted to downplay the extent of the damage, independent satellite data reveals a scene of total devastation, suggesting a permanent rupture in the production of high-performance missile engines. The deepest strike of the night occurred in the Yazd region, targeting a facility dedicated to the processing of cruise missile components. Here, the GBU-57 achieved a penetration of 200 feet. The detonation reportedly triggered a thermobaric effect that consumed the facility's oxygen supply, leading to a massive internal reaction that destroyed both the production zones and the associated storage wings. This specific strike has direct implications for Iran's regional proxies, as this facility was the primary source of the advanced munitions supplied to Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthi movement in Yemen. While the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran claimed only limited impact, the evidence suggests a much more profound disruption of the asymmetric supply chain. The strategic strangulation of the missile program is complete only when the various links, final assembly in Tehran, engine production in Isfahan, component processing in Yazd, and storage in Hormuz, are viewed as a single interconnected organism. By striking all four simultaneously, the United States has created a logistical bottleneck that will likely take years to rectify. This is the essence of a large-scale strategic strangulation operation. Beyond the physical destruction, the psychological impact on the Iranian state and its citizenry cannot be overstated. For decades, the regime projected an image of the mountains as a divine shield, an unassailable fortress that protected the nation's pride. The sight of these mountains being breached, with smoke and fire erupting from deep within their cores, has shattered the myth of invincibility. This has fostered an atmosphere of paranoia among the leadership, as the realization sinks in that no depth is sufficient to hide from modern precision strikes. The disappearance of these depots is not just a loss of hardware. It is the loss of the state's fundamental promise of security. On the diplomatic front, the situation is equally fraught. The strategy currently being employed by the Washington administration appears to be one of intensified conflict for a period of 4 to 6 weeks, designed to degrade Iranian military capabilities so thoroughly that a return to the negotiating table becomes the only viable path for the regime's survival. This is a classic application of coercive diplomacy, where military force is used as the primary lever for political change. Iran's response, however, remains detached from the reality on the ground. Tehran has issued a 6-point list of demands, including war reparations, the closure of all U.S. bases in the region, and a new legal regime for the Strait of Hormuz. These demands, seen by many international observers as posturing for a domestic audience, are unlikely to be met, indicating a long and difficult road ahead for any diplomatic resolution. The broader implications of Operation Epic Fury extend far beyond the borders of Iran. The successful penetration of such deeply buried targets serves as a warning to other nations that have invested heavily in underground defense, including the strategic bunkers of Russia, the submarine pens of China, and the tunnel networks of North Korea. The message is clear. Depth and distance are no longer shields against surgical precision. Even the nuclear front was not spared during this night of high-intensity conflict. Targeted strikes were carried out on the support infrastructure of the Arak heavy water reactor and the yellow cake production lines in Yazd, effectively severing the nuclear fuel cycle at multiple points. While storage areas for fuel rods near the Bushehr plant were impacted, leading to the evacuation of Russian personnel from Rosatom, care was taken to avoid the reactor cores themselves, ensuring that no radiation leaks occurred. This calibrated approach demonstrates a capability to control a rival's nuclear potential through surgical intervention rather than total destruction. As the dust settles from the strikes of March 28, 2026, the world is witnessing the dawn of a new era in military engagement. The collapse of the Iranian underground doctrine, the paralysis of its naval power, and the systematic obstruction of its repair capabilities have demonstrated the overwhelming advantage of modern multi-domain air power. The redistribution of power in the Middle East is now a reality, and whether this leads to a diplomatic breakthrough or a deeper geopolitical fissure remains the central question for the coming months. We will continue to monitor the situation as it evolves within the tight timeline established by the current administration, observing the results of this massive strategic gamble.